And welcome back to Phuket in Focus. And it's not very often that a book comes along that makes a huge impact, especially here in Phuket. But that's about to change because this book, A History of Phuket, is now out and about. The writer is Mr. Colin Mackay. We have him in the studio. Colin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
What on earth drove you to write The History of Phuket?
Well, I'm a historian. I studied history at Edinburgh University. I got my master's degree, and I've always loved history. It's from beginning I could read. And when I came here, I've lived here for 15 years, I found it very difficult to find anything about the history here. So some years ago, I had some free time, and I set about finding out the history. I found out really good stuff. You know, there's really interesting stuff. There's 6,000-year-old trading island. The Greeks were here, the Romans were here, the French tried to take it, the Dutch tried to, and I never knew any of this. So I thought eventually, well, hold on, I'm going to write a book about it and catalogue it all and get going. And so I set about doing that. That was 5 years ago.
Well, how long did you think it would take you at the time?
2 or 3 years, I think.
Oh, that's okay.
You know, but I mean, I did a lot of research as I went, but I had it written within about 3 years, I'd say. But then, you know, you have to collect the maps, you make the maps up, you get all the pictures, you have to find a publisher. And the thing I'm most proud of in the book is the bibliography in the back. It's 800 books are listed there. I'm using 1,000 quotes from people. And going with an academic publisher like White Lotus, you have to define every quote to every page in the book so that further researchers can check it. But that's a very strong resource for the future for any other students of Phuket history. And that was 6 years of. Nowadays it's easier, but for me I had to fly to Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, you know, Bangkok, even London. There's a lot of stuff in London. Now more and more, as these libraries are putting stuff on the net, you can sit in your bedroom and get half of it. That wasn't the case 6 years ago.
Colin, which part of the research really surprised you as you were researching? You must have come across a few things and went, I didn't know that.
The fact that the Romans and Greeks came here, you know, I don't think anyone. Also, when I got on, there was a lot of Arab traders here going from about the 5th century, well, right to the 15th. And when I started reading it, I was thinking of Sinbad the Sailor all the time. I started to do some more work on Sinbad the Sailor and realized he lived in Phuket. If you read the original translations of the 1001 Nights, there's evidence in there that is almost irrefutable that he was living in Phuket. And for example, that would be massive marketing somewhere else. If it was in America, we'd have the Sinbad state on our car number plates. You know,
instead of James Bond Island.
Well, you know, that's one other thing, but there's a very symbiotic relationship between history and tourism, as most of us in the Western world know. And they should really be, not that Phuket needs more tourists, it's doing fine as it is, but certainly we'd get a different type of tourist if they thought it just wasn't, you know, beach resorts and drinking bars, basically.
How much of Phuket's history is written down and verified, and how much is like spoken from one generation to another?
The spoken stuff I can't verify because my Thai is not that great, but I have had a lot of interviews with older generation people, and frankly it's not very reliable, should we say. People say stuff that they think, or they think, but on the other hand, the Thai records, they were very bad at keeping records, and also in the ancient times, they've only been in Phuket since the 14th century. They came roughly around the 14th century. On the 17th century, when Ayutthaya was destroyed, most of the Thai records went. So unfortunately, we have to lean very heavily on Arabic, Chinese, and then later European, who did keep much better records, and they still survive, some of them.
One of the parts of Phuket's history that just about everybody knows because they come past it on the way to anywhere on the south of the island is the Heroines Monument and the two sisters. How much of that story has sort of grown almost out of proportion into almost being a myth, and how much is really true?
The fundamental story is quite true. What they don't tell around the side is the fort did hold out against the Burmese, and Lady Chan, who's the older of the two heroine sisters, she did lead the people. Women have always had a very leading position, in, even today. I think there's more women CEOs in Thailand than any other country. More businesses are owned by women.
Female Prime Minister.
We've got a female Prime Minister. The senator for the island is a female. The mayor of Phuket town is a female. They've always been very strong here, mainly because of the small population. And she did lead them, and they were very brave. And they did hold out because they had a lot of cannons and the Burmese didn't. And the Burmese eventually left after a month because they'd run out of food. And it was in a way a victory. But if you look at the facts, that they destroyed the rest of the island. They stole anyone who wasn't in the fort to sell as slaves. They uprooted all the crops. And even the remainder who were in the fort, a lot of them starved to death after. So it was a pretty Pyrrhic victory, but it was a victory nevertheless. A few years later, the Burmese came and did take the island and did burn down the fort, and we don't hear about that. But, you know, it's good to have heroes or heroines, right?
It seems to me that one thing that really typifies Phuket is just the different people that have come and gone over the years. And now with tourism, tourism itself is very recent on the island, but now we've got different influxes of tourists. There's the Europeans, and then there were the Australians, and now we've got a lot of the Asian partners coming in to see Phuket, and of course the Russians. So there seems still this continuing story.
It's what's been happening for, I'd say, 5,000 years. Yeah. Originally, I wanted to call this book An Island in the Winds, because 6 months the wind blow this way, 6 months they blow that way, and the monsoon, mausim, seasonal in Arabic. And so from time to time influences come from the east, then they come from India and the west, and they meet here, and because it's a very sexually free society, it always has been, they interbreed. So this, as of today, there's always been a lot of people around with more than one nationality of blood. Now, since the Second World War in Thailand began, they're all called Thai Muslims, but those are Arabics, Uzbekistani, Indians, their heritage. And now you have what's called the Luk Krung, you know, the half-children, like my daughters. And they're a complete mix, completely international people. Some of them go to school in Russia, some go to school here, some study in Australia or New Zealand or England or France. And so it just carries on being a melting pot of societies and food too. That's why the food's so great here. You know?
Tell me, how many have you had printed so far?
We did a first print run of this hardback, limited just to 2,000. Actually, I've sold more than half in a week, so no, 2 weeks. So we'll be printing a lot more in softback, paperback, shall we say.
Those of us watching this interview, we'd like to know where we can get a copy. Where can we?
Well, we're just, literally in 2 weeks, they're going so fast, we're having a hard time finding distributors in between selling. We've got into Sang Ho bookstores in all the Tesco's. I'm getting some of the more notable restaurants on the island to sell. We've got a booth in the boat show this weekend. And really, it's everywhere I go, people go, Colin, I want to get one of these books, or we need 5. People who know me are coming up saying, oh, they wanted some books, and they're just moving like hotcakes.
Well, let's hope you sell thousands, because you put a lot of time into it. Obviously, you enjoyed doing it, but it's great to be rewarded for probably what will become a seminal work for people in the future. Congratulations on doing a great book, and we look forward to finding more of the stories out as we all read it and enjoy it. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us on the program.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Colin Mackay on Phuket in Focus. And it's always good on the show every week to speak about the brand new Phuket news. It's hit the newsstands, and here we have this week's copy on the table. And we have the managing editor, Mr. Simon Ostheimer. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
First program.
Yes, indeed.
Scary. This is a big issue this week. We've got a special advertising cover, but the first and the biggest story is, I think, a story we're probably going to see a bit more of this year. The headline says, taxi drivers, no bus.
Yes.
It's just going to keep on going. Are we ever going to get a regular bus service on the island?
It's a story that's been dragging on for many, many years, and it sort of goes back to Phuket's failure to establish a proper public transportation system in years gone by. So this story is to do with the new proposed airport bus, which is meant to be running down through the west coast from the airport. And the local tuk-tuk drivers have said they don't want it, and they've made warnings that last time someone tried to introduce a bus service, the driver was injured and the bus was damaged.
And we don't want that to happen again, of course. But we desperately need better public transport, because almost everybody leaves the island going, oh, if only the island had decent transport.
Well, the other issue with it is the lack of public transportation means that tourists come here, they quickly realise tuk-tuks are very expensive, and it forces them to rent scooters, which everyone can do. They're very cheap, but most of these people don't know how to ride it, and certainly not in Phuket traffic conditions.
And the road fatalities.
And the road fatalities, yes. Yeah. So it's indirectly causing a lot more problems.
The other thing is too that because they don't tend to feel that they can travel too far, because a lot of them stay in Patong, they don't really get out of Patong Beach.
That's true. I mean, this particular airport bus, this is basically from the airport to the west coast. So it doesn't address the issue of a wider need for public transportation. But certainly it does limit people in terms of what they see and do.
And a lot of the threats seem to be coming from the Kata Koron taxi and tuk-tuk drivers. Are they a particularly militant lot?
I think they're as militant as any other group on the island. It's just they feel with this particular bus service that their own special interests could be in danger. And by special interest, basically the huge amounts of money that they're making.
It's very tribal, isn't it? It's, they're all protecting their little patch. Even if you go to a hotel, they've usually got the same taxi or tuk-tuk out the front, and they're protecting their little patch of land.
Well, there's been times past. I mean, the hotels are not allowed to run their own bus services. They're allowed to provide pickup from the airports to the hotel, but then if guests want to go from the hotel on the sightseeing tour, the tuk-tuks demand that they go with them. And there have been cases where tourists have been pulled out of vans because it's not been part of this grouping.
Welcome to Thailand. Welcome to Phuket. Another story, and we've seen a lot of this over the last couple of years as well, are these illegal beach restaurants. This one's drawn a bit of focus this week. It's actually a restaurant that I frequented a lot myself. I can recommend the Mango Shake. But it seems a bit under threat, although there's a twist to this story.
Well, it's the restaurant in Nai Han. As you say, quite popular with locals and tourists, but there have been complaints about sort of the runoff with the the wastewater and things affecting the lagoon area, which is right in front of it, where lots of families go and children. And so there was these complaints made, and the restaurant was ordered destroyed. And so we went down to speak with them and said, "How do you feel about this? Obviously, you spent money on putting in this new concrete foundations." He said, "This is the first I've heard of it. I had no idea that I was scheduled for demolition."
Was that I have no idea, or I've got no idea?
That's what he said. I mean, we can't infer anything from that.
Okay. A lot of the locals, though, were noticing a very prominent pipe that we got shots of from Phuket News TV during the week, sort of running down into the stream, and also some rather suspicious algae on the rocks right below the restaurant.
Yeah, but I'm not a scientist. I mean, you'd have to sort of test the waters to find out exactly what was causing that problem.
You're everything else in the Phuket News. Why can't you be a scientist as well? Moving into some other parts of the paper before we get to the life section. What's the Mission Impossible story about?
This story is something that Alistair Forbes, the executive editor, has been following for quite some time. Basically, one company was appointed to construct all of the new police stations and accommodation blocks for the entire country. It was a mistake from the start. They've been given an extension of deadline repeatedly, kept on failing to meet it, and now the police have issued one last 30-day deadline. If they fail to do that, they're going to be sued in court for billions in compensation. So
we've got a whole lot of police in Thailand living in tents?
While they're looking at half-completed blocks of accommodation.
Not on. An interesting article you've got is why we need the Russians. I mean, a lot of us would sort of look around and notice a lot of Russian people living on the island. Indeed, we've got our very own version of the Phuket News, and Novosti Phuketa. Why we need the Russians? What's the basis of this story?
It's addressing a lot of negative comments and feelings that we've had towards the Russian community. They've been in the news recently with the attacks on sort of allegedly Russian-owned businesses in the north of the island, and we had that as our front page story a few weeks ago, and people have just, I say, been commenting negatively about the Russians, as a tarring all of the group, I guess, with the same brush. We kind of wanted to make the point that the Russians are just as important as any other group of international tourists.
Well, clearly they're contributing a lot economically to the island.
Well, the sheer numbers, you look at they're in the top 3 of arrivals to Phuket, top 3 of tourist numbers. It's them, the Chinese, and the Australians, and the Koreans are not far behind. So there's such a large proportion of tourist arrivals. It's a market that you can't ignore. So with this article, we're basically addressing some of the complaints, and we speak to people who do deal with Russians, selling them villas and car rental services and things to sort of get people's reactions. So it's a balanced article, but we're hoping, just to kind of address some of these maybe unfounded complaints.
I imagine if the Phuket News was around 10 years ago, the article may have said why we need the Australians.
Yes.
One of the great features of the Phuket News each week is right in the middle, and it's the life section. What's in life this week?
Well, as I like to sort of make the point, life is something that we don't put this content online. It's only available in print. The news and the sport, yes, you can read those stories on the PhuketNews.com as well. So we put a lot of effort into this, and interview local personalities, and I think it's a lovely read for the weekend, and it's something, it makes it worth picking up for just 20 baht.
Sure.
So the cover story, as you can see here, is these 2 twins, Ta and Tu. They're very talented.
Ta and Tu.
Ta and Tu, and basically twin artists. So it's kind of an interview with them about how being twins kind of affects the art that they create, and their experiences of being artists in Phuket.
So they're both of a creative bent.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
It's interesting because I know quite a lot of identical twins, and sometimes you get
I don't know any. You must be moving in different circles.
Yeah. But they can sometimes be almost identical in their mannerisms, and of course their look, and their interests, and the sort of partners they like and everything. But for example, I know a set of twins, I was going to say 2 twins, a set of twins, and one is gay and one is not, which is very unusual for identical twins. But anyway, this is a great story on the front. And what else is in life just before we finish?
Well, a couple of other things I'd like to put out is Jada Ponlid. She's a local chef/artist. Have a bit of an artistic theme this issue, and her food is actually sold all around the country. And she's even had requests to send her meals abroad. I mean, you just have to think of the logistics of this. Isn't issuing just a recipe or a how to make. This is actually her making food and then shipping it off and putting it on planes. So an interview with her, very interesting lady. And then we have Jamie Monk as well, who's a kind of well-known blogger on the island. And
very well-known.
And he's done a lovely little piece about this place called Lam Sai, which most people would never have heard of. But it's up in the northeast and quite remote, and just sort of a slice of Phuket how it used to be.
I've often tried to get Jamie on to first the radio program and now on the TV, and he says, no, I've got a good head for radio, and I don't like being on radio, so I don't think we're ever going to see him.
Yeah, he's a bit media shy, but he's not afraid to get himself out there in terms of his writing.
Yeah, it's a great guy. Well, the Phuket News out now, and only 20 baht, and I'm told it's available at 600 outlets around the island.
600 plus.
Name a few. Over the road at Tesco.
Tesco, Sang Ho, Family Mart, 7-Eleven.
Central. Junk Salon. And another 595.
Yes.
Simon O, the managing editor of the Phuket News, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Tim.